Go ahead. This is our public hearing that was scheduled for 8 o'clock, but we concluded our public hearing during the period of time where it passed 8 o'clock. So I'll let you do the introduction to this.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a first public hearing to consider the City Council election district boundaries, including discussion of the redistricting process, review of permissible criteria that can be used in redrawing council election district boundaries, and receiving public input on communities of interest and potential district boundaries. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Lori Sassoon, our Deputy City Manager, who's the lead on this.
Thank you, City Manager Gillison, and thank you, Mayor and Council members, for tonight. We're excited to have our very first public hearing related to the redistricting process for 2020. And I want to introduce our demographic consultant, Todd Tatum from National Demographics Corporation. And NDC worked with us in our redistricting back in 2015, 2016. They're back with us on the team this time to provide expert demographic assistance as we work through the redistricting process. So I'll turn it over to Todd, and we're going to kind of tag team together, but he's going to kick off our presentation for you tonight.
Great. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, City staff. Again, my name's Todd Tatum with National Demographics Corporation. We're here tonight. This is our first of 5 hearings. The California Voting Rights Act law mandates that we have at least 4 hearings for redistricting. Due to your settlement agreement from your first districting process, you all will go through 5 hearings. Tonight's the first. The second will be on November 3rd, followed by January 19th, February 2nd, and February 16th. Our deadline for adoption is April 17th, 2022. The major challenge that we had this year with redistricting was the delay in the census data from the federal government. As you may know, we didn't get that data in until mid-August. And now we have to wait until the state of California produces what they refer to as prisoner-adjusted numbers, which probably will not be released until later this month, and we'll be able to use that data at the beginning of October. Prisoner-adjusted means that any citizens from Rancho Cucamonga that are in state prisons, they will be counted back at their homes in Rancho Cucamonga. So those will be the final numbers that we get. When we do our redistricting process, we follow 3 categories, the first being federal laws. The main federal law that we have to follow is equal population. We also must follow the Federal Voting Rights Act, and we have to be sure that there's no racial gerrymandering. The second, which is new this year, the California criteria is ranked in order. We have to make sure, number 1, that the districts are geographically contiguous to the extent practicable. We have to look for undivided neighborhoods and communities of interest, which we'll go over a bit later. We have to make sure that the districts have easily identifiable boundaries, meaning we'll follow major roads or freeways or other features that are easily understandable. And we have to achieve compactness, which means we can't reach around from one area to another and form a district that we try to combine people that is not a compact district. In addition, the state law requires that we not look at partisanship or any party registration or affiliation. And as you'll note in all the data that you'll see that NDC produces, we never mention any party affiliation of any kind. The third category is the other traditional redistricting principles that we follow. Number 1, we want to minimize the shift of voters into different districts. We want to make sure we do as best possible as we can to keep voters in the district that they are in so that they don't get shifted to new election years. Meaning those that think they're going to be voting in 2022, they might get moved and they would now vote in 2024. So we do our best to make sure that they can stay in that district. With that in mind, we want to respect the voters' choices in the continuity in office. We want to identify any future population growth that you all might know of. Maybe there's some vacant areas within one of your districts that you know growth is coming. Obviously, during the redistricting process, we will only use the census data that was produced for 2020, but it's good to know if there are some future high growth areas coming up as we go through this process again in 10 years. And we want to strive to preserve the core of the existing districts as best we can. So on this slide, this is a demographic summary of your existing districts. And as you can see, the deviation across all 4 districts is 10.59%. The state law mandates that we are at 10% or less. So there will be some adjustments in the lines of your district. The numbers that we have here are from the U.S. Census numbers, so we don't have those final state numbers that we will get later this month. But as you'll see in the citizens voting age population, those percentages that you see across in every district, those are numbers that will be used throughout the whole redistricting process. In looking at these estimates that we have on the U.S. 2020 census, we're pretty confident that the final numbers are going to be very close to what you see here, meaning that we'll only have minor adjustments to be in compliance. So the California Voting Rights Act mandates that we have to look at all protected classes within your city. They define those protected classes as Latinos, African Americans, Asian Americans, and Native Americans. On these next few slides, you'll see that there are some pockets of protected classes throughout your city. The first slide showing the Latino citizen voting age population, and as you can see, some of the pink squares show a pretty high population in those areas. The next slide shows the African American citizen voting age population. You have a little bit there in the 25 to 35% range. And the next slide is the Asian American citizen voting age population, and you have a little increase there, it looks like up in the north end of your city. Next up, we want to define your neighborhoods. And this is where we're going to ask for your help and the public's help. We're looking at what your neighborhoods are and trying to figure out exactly what your communities are. And again, we need your help defining that. Examples of physical features that may define your neighborhood are, like I mentioned earlier, natural dividing lines such as highways, major roads, rivers, canals, hills, areas around parks or schools, or any other neighborhood landmarks that might be unique to your city or your districts that we don't know about. If we don't know that, we can't take that into consideration as we draw these maps. Now, the next slide, we're going to go beyond the neighborhoods and define communities of interest. We do this, we ask about your neighborhoods and communities of interest for 2 reasons. First, the law requires that we ask it, and second, we also want to emphasize that if we do have to make changes in your current districts to get them into balance, we want to know the best places to make those adjustments. What we want to do the best we can to prevent the dividing of a neighborhood or community of interest. Now, you can think of communities of interest as shared geographical areas, homeowners association, areas influenced by same roads, things that may think of as traditionally bringing a neighborhood or community together. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lori, who has some great examples of possible communities of interest for your city.
Thank you, Todd. So, we as staff took a look at what might be some communities of interest that we would be aware of, and we thought we would share some of those slides with you tonight as food for thought as we consider public input on this. So this first slide, this is reflecting, so the dark purple lines are your existing council districts, and you're seeing illustrated here the historic zip codes in the city. So sort of roughly mirroring, you can see here we're not really breaking up a lot of these zip codes, interestingly, along our existing borders. Here's another one. These are taking a look at the general plans we've had through the years. What are some of the neighborhoods that were defined in some of our planning documents? And we've come up with these. You see them here in the colors. And again, I think because we just recently drew your district boundaries, you're seeing here that the existing boundaries already sort of reflect along many of these lines. Again, because we just did this not too long ago, right? And did indeed consider documents like this. Another one, here's major roads and freeways. That's something that's specifically called out in the Fair Maps Act as a criteria as we consider communities of interest. You can see, again, our districts generally following many of our major roads in the city. This is planned communities. And I recall from last time, we definitely worked hard to keep Terra Vista and Victoria as together as we could. We just about did it. And then Edgewater Highlands and Karen are also intact. A couple more. Here are LMDs. And again, we worked to keep those pretty much intact in the last cycle. And finally, these are elementary school boundaries. So the boundaries, not for the districts, but for each elementary school itself. Because, one could consider your elementary school neighborhood as a possible community of interest. So just ideas. Again, the Fair Maps app isn't requiring us to exactly, specifically follow every possible geographic boundary or community, but rather for us to consider those communities as the most important building block in districts. But we still have to balance all those other needs with regard to population and all the other factors that Todd talked about. So with that, I will turn it over to Todd to talk a little bit about our next steps at the subsequent hearings and how the public can participate.
Great. Thank you, Lori. And Lori's right, the next steps, and with your next meeting coming up beginning of November, we will be in the map drafting process. You're going to have a couple of different tools to draw maps and review them. And as soon as the data is available, we will begin drafting those maps, and we ask that you all begin at the same time. I obviously will be in touch with Lori as the data gets in and we can load it into the different tools that you're going to use. The first thing that the public and you will have access to is the simple map drawing tool that we call the paper map kit. And this allows a person who wants to use paper versus a computer or somebody who doesn't have access to internet, they can draw the districts on the map, on the paper maps. The only drawback on this is they can't use a lot of the demographic data that we're going to produce. They can only use raw population count. But there's also an Excel tool that can go with the paper maps that will allow the addition of the citizens voting age population data, and the Excel tool does the math for you and makes drawing those paper maps that much easier. After all that data is in, on your, is it DrawRC? DrawRC.org, you'll have access to this online interactive map tool where you'll be able to review the different maps in the current districts as well as any proposed revision to the current districts once all that data is loaded in. So a member of the public, you as council folks, city staff, you can take your maps and overlay them on this using this tool and see where your proposed lines are versus the current lines, versus I could put a map on there versus Lori's map. We could see how they match up. Many different ways to use this, and this will be on a link to your website. And also, if anyone has their own mapping software, we've run into a bit of that this year. We just ask that you kind of follow these three things. Make sure that we get a GIS shape file or use the census block equivalency file. Make sure you send it to the jurisdiction listed in the email address. And with that, I'd like to say that the first stage of this process is really just to educate you on what's coming, get the conversation going on how your current districts work in your city, if there needs to be any adjustments or changes that you know of. We also are going to need your input on your neighborhoods and your communities of interest. So I hope that you can think about that at our next hearing, that we can put those communities of interest into these draft maps. And once again, on behalf of National Demographics Corporation, I thank you for this opportunity and look forward to working with you all. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
On this matter. Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. There's no action to be taken this evening, but public hearing number 2 will take place at our city council meeting on November 3rd at time specific 8 p.m. in the council chambers, and we invite the community to submit their comments and review documents at www.drawrc.org. Again, that's www.drawrc.org. Okay, thank you so much.
Mr. Mayor, may I make a comment, please? We received some correspondence from residents who were unsure of the process of this redistricting, and I am hopeful that they are watching tonight, because one resident said that they don't remember exactly how it took place, but they were unhappy, and they were either drawn personally by council members or reflective of only council members' interest. Another resident said that outreach is really just checking a box and not really asking for input. And I hope those two people are listening tonight, because number one, we are actively asking for input. There are several ways you can submit that input. We are using an independent consultant that is following state guidelines. So to those two people who wrote in, please be very, very aware that this is a public engagement process, and we are listening, and it is reflective of the law as well as what is in the best interest of our community.
Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Excellent report. We will now move on to our